Scott, who are you?
I am a curious Canadian that likes learning about a lot of different things. And I am the author of a new book called The Uncertainty Advantage, which is a guide for young people on how to develop a better relationship with uncertainty. Because rapid change is the defining aspect of our era, and learning to embrace it is arguably the most important thing that we can all do to thrive in our lives and careers.
What are you talking about? There's no uncertainty out there, right? I mean, what a topic to tackle. I mean, I think I think it's I mean, I'm biased, obviously, given having read your book and getting to know you, but I mean, in my own work on the mental fitness side, if we can learn how to thrive in uncertainty and use it as as an energy, I guess you can say, that works for us instead of against us. I mean, that is just, I think, the superpower of the foreseeable future because it's wild out there and it's wild in here too, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you describe, just before we get into some of the topics in the book, just how would you describe what you do day in and day out?
I founded a charity called Venture for Canada that helps young people develop entrepreneurial skills. And over the past 12 years, we've raised over $80 million in funding and supported almost 15,000 people to launch their careers across Canada. And in the context of my work, I've seen how firsthand uncertainty is one of the main things that holds people back in their lives and careers. So much of my career has been spent helping young people launch their careers and in building a national organization in Canada.
And you, from my research, I mean, your story is I mean, nothing's certain, of course, but I mean, you went from, let's say, a more certain environment, having, a role at Goldman Sachs, to leaving that to basically launch what you just described, right? Like how just give us some context, like what was going on in your mind during those times to make that leap?
Leaving Goldman Sachs at the age of 22 to go found Venture for Canada when there were like no resources and it was just getting off the ground was the most uncertain thing I've ever done in my life. And it was an example of where I really embraced uncertainty, and I saw firsthand the benefits that it can bring. Over the last 12 years, we exceeded what I thought we would ever like achieve at Venture for Canada, and it was also a really scary and anxiety-inducing time. I remember walking out of my office and feeling those two things: excitement and anxiety. And it's important to note that for most people, uncertainty brings both emotions, and that it's okay to have both emotions. It's actually quite rational.
Yeah. Well, that's I mean, I'm working on this topic for the next book. That's kind of the between space, right? Or between selves, where you're in this situation where, yeah, like in one hand you can be super excited, but almost at the same time be terrified, right? So for you then, what worked for you? How did you? Maybe this is the wrong language. You can correct me if wrong, but like, what gave you the courage to actually pursue, the desire and the vision that you had when you're kind of oscillating between those emotions?
There were a few different things. I think one was that I realized that there was a risk in not taking risks,
Mm.
and that I was in a job that didn't align with my interests and passion, and ultimately I think would be like a dead end. And I realized that if I stayed there longer, I would just be stagnating.
Yeah.
So one thing that motivated me was that I realized that risk in not taking the risk was bigger than the risk in me going and creating Adventure for Canada.
That's a nice
The
reframe.
second part was that I come from an entrepreneurial family and I had a lot of like a support encouragement to go do this. And I think it's important to acknowledge that like a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
And I think I've taken more risks because I grown up in an environment where risk taking was much more normalized than most people.
Do you have any examples
And
of that, Scott? Like, what anything
oh
that
yeah, totally.
sticks in your mind?
I mean, my father is an entrepreneur. My grandfather is an entrepreneur. My other grandfather was an entrepreneur. My uncle's an entrepreneur. I just come from a family where there are a ton of entrepreneurial people. And growing up, yeah, business was always talked around the dinner table. And I not entrepreneurship was something that was extremely normalized, as was risk taking.
Mm, interesting. Do you are there any I'm always curious, like, there's things that stick with us as kids and as we're growing up of either a situation, I mean, share as many or as little details as you'd like, but there any moments in during those times where you remember an example where like, wow, that's a pretty wild scenario and it implanted a lesson for you?
One story I talk about in the book was my grandfather founded a company that ended up becoming a quite successful seaweed company that they turned seaweed into a bunch of different products. And when I was a kid, he would do this little magic trick where he would put seaweed behind his ear. And then if you would, as a kid, then go get the seaweed, and then he would pull out a $2 a toonie
Yeah.
for Canadians, or for non-Canadians, that's like a $2 coin. And it was like a fun little thing about turning seaweed into money. And yeah,
Oh, that's
that
cool.
happened really when I was like 5, but it was I think an example of where like entrepreneurship in a kind of whimsical way was celebrated within my family.
Yeah. Okay, so you leave Goldman Sachs, you go down the road of starting, or bringing in some venture capital for young people in Canada. I mean, like, what were the questions that you were asking at that time in your life? Like, what were you reflecting on to get this off the ground?
I reflected on a couple things. I think first is whether there was like a need for something like Venture for Canada. And I talked to a lot of other organizations, and I really got a sense that there was a gap in terms of what Venture for Canada was trying to do, and that there was a real need for this. I think the second was I reflected on what are the skills needed to be successful in this. And I realized that the skills, I think, of like persuasion, public speaking, understanding the problem I was going after, were things that I had or could develop, and that there was a strong like founder uh, problem fit. So I felt like I was the right person to tackle building Venture for Canada. And the third thing that I would say that came to mind for me was the passion that I think I had for it. Like, I come from an entrepreneurial family. I believe in the importance of helping more people have the ability to become entrepreneurs. So across those three things, like need, the skill set alignment, as well as like my passion alignment, I felt it made a ton of sense for me to make that choice and leave Goldman Sachs to go found Venture for Canada.
Okay. And then fast forward. I mean, you've done this obviously for many years. You've seen founders coming in with various levels of uncertainty or having to navigate uncertainty, having to look at, obviously even just our changing business landscape and so forth. I mean, there's just no shortage of, let's just say, uncertainty. But there's one thing to notice that. There's another thing to decide to, okay, let's pursue the topic and write a book about it. Like, what was it for you that gave that motivation?
Two different things. The first, seeing that fear of uncertainty is arguably the most prevalent thing that holds people back in their lives and careers, especially when they're starting their career as a young person. That really motivated me to write this book. The second is that I have seen my relationship with uncertainty like ebb and flow, where at some points in my life I have loved uncertainty, like leaving Goldman Sachs. But at other times, I've really been paralyzed by uncertainty, like during COVID, where I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder,
Mm,
which at the core is a fear of uncertainty. And I really went through acute mental health challenges for a period of around 2 years. Well, 6 months more intensely, but 2 years kind of uh, where it was I was didn't feel like myself. And that experience really motivated me to want to write a book to help others, especially young people, navigate uncertainty. Because while most people don't have OCD, I think many people can struggle to develop a positive relationship with uncertainty.
yeah. Yeah. Tell us about, is this around the time the 4 a.m. walk happened?
Yeah, so that was in the worst of it. So, and I ended up I can go into sort of more detail on that,
Yeah,
but
please.
essentially I realized that something wasn't right in like January 2021, and my mental health just kept on kind of deteriorating. I was getting into kind of obsessive compulsive spirals. By mid February, I just reached a point where I was like, something is wrong here. Because usually I'm feeling not like my usual self. I am not sleeping. I am just feeling this like massive anxiety. And then I had listened to a podcast and someone had talked about their diagnosis with OCD and how did you treat it. So then I started doing all this research to find a clinic to help treat me with OCD, which was an amazing clinic. It's called OCD North. It's actually in your neck of the
Oh,
woods.
really?
It's headquartered in Barrie. Um, and they do amazing work. Because for context of listeners, especially maybe if you think you have OCD or you have a family member, obsessive compulsive disorder is a quite unique thing to treat. It's not the same. What you don't treat it through like talk therapy. Generally, it's clinically thought that to get treated for OCD, you should go to someone who is like an expert in like largely only treating OCD,
Okay.
because the treatment for OCD is quite unique compared to other mental health situations. So anyway, I ended up getting treated, and when you go through obsessive compulsive disorder treatment, which is called exposure ritual prevention therapy, it's very intensive,
Yeah, like,
and
what is it?
yeah. So for context on it, it's so exposure. So you expose yourself to your fears, and then there is the ritual prevention. So you stop doing the different rituals. So that could be like, okay, I'm going to wash my hands 20 times a day. Okay, at every 30 minutes, you stop doing that.
Hmm.
So think of it almost like you're detoxing
Yeah.
from things that like were helping you cope with anxiety. You're detoxing from the rituals, and you're detoxing from, and you're then also exposing yourself to things that make you anxious. So, for instance, one of the things I had to do was record my fears and then like walk around the neighborhood for like an hour, like listening to my like fears in my
Gosh.
headphones.
Okay.
And and then I can't do any of the rituals that make me feel better. So, the in short, when you first start doing exposure ritual prevention therapy, for many people, it actually becomes the most challenging
I
time
was gonna say it must feel
because
torturous.
it's torturous because in some ways it's I've never had addiction challenges, but um, when I talk with people who have, there's some parallels
Yeah.
because you're essentially detoxing from compulsive behavior, of which drug addiction is in that same
Yeah.
area. And yeah, you're just like, it was so, essentially that night. And then I don't go into as much detail about this in the book just because of space. But this was a couple weeks after I'd started treatment. And that night, actually, like I had done a pretty good job of like not uh, doing the compulsive things. But that night, I just was like, I couldn't take it anymore.
Okay.
I was like, this is, I was like, I can't handle it. So I ended up doing some of the compulsive Googling. I was like up all night at like 3 in the morning. And this is like for mid to late March and like early 2021. I ended up walking around my neighborhood and I was like Googling about various illnesses, which was one of the compulsive things that I was doing. And I wasn't supposed to. And then at the end of that night, I just felt so defeated. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like I've done the thing that I know I shouldn't be doing. And after that, it was like, sometimes you have to hit like really low points to then be. I was talking to someone about that. Last night I was at this dinner and there was a woman who's an addiction counselor next to me. And she was saying that for addiction, like I asked her, I was like, what's the biggest predictor of like whether someone is like successful in doing like addiction like when she would meet 1,000 people the
Mhm.
first time and she would sort of see, and she was like motivation. And she
Mm.
was like, if someone's motivated, it's a really hard thing to go through that. On OCD, what I can't speak of because it was the most challenging thing in my life. I think it's really important to talk about OCD because a lot of people think OCD is just like washing your hands. And it is important for people to understand it is one of the top 10 causes of disability in the world.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it is an incredibly debilitating mental health illness. And it's not this like little like light thing that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have that which I think a lot of people they misunderstand how like when you're in a really bad OCD state, it's like you feel like the world is like ending. Like
Mhm.
it's really, really, really bad. And yeah, so I luckily, you know, I kept up with the treatment. I didn't fall back into kind of compulsive behaviors.
Do you replace it
And
with something, Scott? Like, when you stop, basically, it seems like kind of like willpower around, "I was told not to do these things," so you're listening to all your fears, but then you can't do the regular rituals that would provide, probably, I would imagine, comfort and some level of safety in this situation. But what is it, just a matter of continuing to train your mind to handle that discomfort, or do you replace it with better, like, other habits or something? Like, what's the flow?
the former. So it is just training your brain
Mm,
to get more comfortable dealing with uncertainty without having to go back to these things. And there's certain things where it's around like, okay, sleeping good amounts, like which
yeah,
to be fair, I did kind of before, but exercise, being aware of when you're starting to fall into compulsive kind of traps. Uh, so you know, one of the things at the end of OCD treatment is kind of going through and getting a sense of like what are the healthy things you can do moving forward to cope with uncertainty. But I didn't replace it with other compulsive behaviors. Really, the core I think of successful obsessive compulsive disorder treatment is yeah, just getting used. It's really uncomfortable, but it's
yeah,
essentially getting used to dealing with anxiety-inducing things without falling back on maladaptive practices. And gradually over time, your brain gets used to and okay to handling that uncertainty and stress without. The reasons is I think this well it applies to OCD. In my case was kind of extreme. The same applies to other people who just struggle with uncertainty or
I
anxiety.
was gonna say,
Is
any
it's
habits you wanna break, this seems like the recipe.
yeah, and it just requires yeah, totally. Just it's I mean a lot similar to my conversation last night with this woman. Like it requires a lot of motivation,
Yeah,
a lot of willpower, and I think I reached that 4 a.m. walk in the middle of the night. It was such a low point, and I was feeling so sad and just defeated and things that it really I was like, I never again do I want to like
mm,
like I it really was like I'm not sure before that experience I could never have said what is the absolute low point of my life.
yeah,
I'm 34 and what I would say now that point if someone was to ask me unambiguously, that is the by far lowest point that I have ever felt in my entire life. It just was
'cause it
I
was
was
it a
after
sense of
that, I was like, I
failure?
never want to feel like this again.
Do you think it was a sense, did you have a sense of, it was like a sense of failure, that because you had worked so hard and then you essentially, you went back? It feels like,
There
if
was a
as an
sense
alcoholic, it would be like you took the drink, you
yeah,
know?
there was a sense of failure that I felt like a low point, but also just was like, I was like, I have no choice. I need to develop a better relationship with uncertainty. Like this is
Mm,
like I can't live in this anxiety anymore. And the thing that was amazing, and this is just to share my own experience too, is that like my I think I forget there's a Yale study or it's like a Yale score. I forget what it's called, but it's like a OCD score of your severity. Like my OCD at the peak, the symptoms were really bad. It was like I feel like it was like something like it was like the score was out of like 50 and I was like 45. Like it
wow,
was
okay.
like my symptoms were really bad. The reason I'd say that is OCD exists on a spectrum. And it's
Yeah,
not like I'm cured of OCD, but I would just say my symptoms now would be very like low
yeah,
in terms of where it would sit on that. But I also didn't do I like did not do medication through any of this. Like
okay.
I many times I wanted to, but I was like, I'm going to like sit here and be in this like really uncomfortable space and try to expose my brain to all of this anxiety that is like coming at me. And in some ways today I actually have to deal with more anxiety inducing things than at any other point in my life. But for listeners, I think the optimism of my tale is that even if you're at a really low point in your life, you can, or with a lot of hard work, like this is easier to say now, 5 years
Yeah.
later,
No, but you
but
went
you
through
can,
it,
yeah, you can end up building a great, like in some ways, I think I'm now compared to most people a lot more comfortable with uncertainty
for sure.
than like than most people out there, and For that, I am grateful of that OCD experience because it, in some ways, was such a radical wake up call, and that it really motivated me to completely change my life,
Mhm.
and and made me very passionate to write this book, The Uncertainty Advantage, because I saw how the more that you try to control the things around you, the more you make your world smaller, the more you're ultimately going to be sort of taken advantage of, or
Yeah.
vulnerable to a world that is really chaotic.
Mhm.
Like there's a line my therapist said, that she said the only way out is through, and it's so true.
Yeah.
Like we need to just like face the uncertainty like head on, and that means no compulsive behavior, no avoiding, no certainty seeking. It's like it's embracing, and there's so many. We all certainty seek in
Yeah.
some
Oh,
ways,
yeah.
and sometimes I still do it too. Like I'm not perfect, but I think that like exposing ourselves to the unknown is one of the most important things to learn to build a better relationship with uncertainty.
Thank you. I mean, for going into that level of detail, because I really do. I mean, I see a lot of parallels to even things that I've been through, and I imagine with listeners as well. Like, there's just you might not be experiencing exactly kind of the clinical version of OCD that you're describing, but there's so many other, I think, almost variations where we struggle, whether that's anxiety or depression, or that there's, I think that, like, that through line, like you were saying, like, going through it and really feeling it, at times or often, at least I've felt this as well. I mean, we're not physicians here, obviously, but can share our experiences. But I remember I went through an experience with anxiety that eventually, really felt it and feel like I got on the other side. And my coach said, "Sounds like from what you're sharing that you're now bored of worry." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds really right." Like, it's I'm bored of dealing with the worry, like, I'm moving on, you kinda zoom out and you're at a high, but couldn't have done that without sitting with the worry, and, like,
Yeah.
really feeling it. So, in present day, Scott, like, when something, whether that's in, like, a previous kind of OCD tendency or just uncertainty in general, when you feel it, what do you do?
A couple things. One is to actually just feel it. So if I'm feeling like really uncomfortable or anxious, just to be like, I'm feeling really anxious right now.
Okay.
Like my body, I can feel the anxiety emanating in it. And sometimes if I'm feeling really anxious, I'll just be like, okay, I need to just sit for a sec and just like not meditate, because that doesn't really work for me, but just sometimes just like kind of quasi meditate, just like lay or sit and just like don't do anything
Yeah.
for like a little bit, and just like feel my body, be mindful, like
Mhm.
if mindfulness kind of in the
Yeah.
context, I find that's really helpful when I have an anxiety inducing thing. Second is I do find a method that I talk about in the book, the ruler method,
Okay.
which was created through Mark Brackett at Yale University, which stands for kind of, it's an acronym for a couple different things. But the first is recognize, like it's understanding, like okay, like what I talked about before, feeling what's in your body, then understand like why are you feeling really anxious. Label, so then you start to say, okay, this is anxious. Then you would go to express, like you could say it to your partner, or you could write it down in a diary, and then ultimately you like regulate the emotion. And I do find the ruler method can be helpful when I'm feeling maybe a little dysregulated. And maybe the third one is something I talk a lot about in the book, is just like self-compassion as well. So I think when I have a lot on my plate, like a couple of weeks ago, and even this week, there's just I've had with this book launch, there's just a lot, and a lot of personal things going on, and I've just been really busy like the last couple weeks. And I felt a little run down recently, just in the sense of just feeling tired.
Yeah.
And sometimes just to be like, yeah, well, you know what? I have a lot on the go, and it's okay to feel tired, and
Yeah.
not to like beat myself up for feeling tired. But yeah, and then maybe the fourth thing that I'd share actually is helpful, is that I think is that concept of like life is a marathon punctuated by sprints. Like
Mhm.
right now, I'm in sprint mode, and I'm gonna have to be really busy for the next like month.
Yeah.
But then I'm going on a trip for 9 weeks, and I'm going to have lots of time to recharge and like reflect. So sometimes there's a degree to which I find sometimes, like, yeah, you just have to push through sometimes. You can't do that for, like, ever,
Yeah,
but I think sometimes recognizing that, oh, yeah, there's an end,
yeah,
and, I might be feeling tired now, but, that's not going to be sometimes you have to grind it out for a little bit to achieve your goals, and
yeah,
then you can take a nice little restorative break for a little bit. But, I find that that's helpful to if I'm feeling tired to be like, "This shall pass."
for
This is
sure.
not, like, busyness for or anxiety inducing for, like, an extended period of time with no end.
I think the key though in what you're sharing on the recovery side of thing is because a lot of people they don't schedule in that recovery and they just continue to push, push, push. And then obviously we know what happens at the end of that. I mean, eventually you can't continue like that. And I remember, I think what's been helpful on this side at least, and I think it was Tim Ferriss. I heard speak about this on his podcast at one point. Is just going through either quarter by quarter or you can plan it out for the year, but like actually pre-scheduling, that trip or moments of rest or like I think you need to be a bit proactive in these when you know you're about to come up to a sprint so it doesn't just become like, yeah, the next 2-3 weeks are hectic because of whatever the reasons, and then you finish and then it's like, well, and the next 2-3 weeks are hectic because of this other reason. Like you have to, shouldn't say you have to, but it's helpful to be proactive around, I have a scheduled break here intentionally. I know it's going to be hardcore. I'm going to give it my all, but I'm going to, give myself a day to just do nothing, or I'm going to go like whatever it is for you, spend time in an art gallery, like whatever, fills your cup. Um, and that's easy enough to do. I mean, if you plan it out, right? But we just need to do it. I think that's the key,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I agree, and I like that concept of scheduling. Even, to go back to the example I shared earlier, like, kind of from the middle of August to the middle of November is busy for promoting this book, and then uh, I purposefully scheduled this 9-week trip, which also coincides with me leaving Venture for Canada.
Okay.
So it's like
Yeah.
really busy period of time, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna treat myself and go on a big long trip, and I've never gone on a 9-week long trip before, and I'm really excited for that.
Yeah.
And there's also sometimes for me something really rewarding of when you have like a really intense period, and then you immediately like go somewhere far away and just like
Yeah.
disconnect. And,
Totally.
and it just feels like really, really it makes the vacation feel like extra nice.
Yeah. Well, and also since I mean, since you have essentially a chapter of your life coming to a close on the Venture Canada side of things, something that I've been just learning from interviewing all these ancient teachers is this thing I think we've lost in modern day society, but having these kind of rites of passage or when things end or when things begin, like having a ritual of some sort that, signifies, okay, this is the end of a chapter and there's a new beginning coming, and you do something different or you do something physical or like, right, like some sort of ritual to it. We don't really, I mean, we do that in big things like a marriage or something like that, or when kids are born and what, but everything else for the most part, like we don't have rituals for beginnings and ends of like other big moments in our lives,
Yeah.
right? So I'm happy you're doing that. That's powerful.
Yeah, and it's the other thing I talk about in the book a little bit is the importance too of like celebrating big things when they end.
Yeah,
And that's something I think that's really important. And I didn't do that as much in the past, but now, like when I did my book launch in Toronto, I went out to dinner later with a bunch of friends and family, and I'm glad I did an in-person book launch. There's a lot of work to do
yeah,
in-person book launch, with not necessarily always a ton of ROI.
mhm,
And I'm really glad that I did it, like because I was just it's celebrating and something that I'll always remember for the rest of my life. So I think a part of self-compassion is, like, celebrating the wins when they do happen and doing something meaningful to celebrate that.
yeah, yeah, and with other people. I mean, that was one of the pillars of your book, around networks and strong networks is something I wanted to talk about just the ideas that, I think I read something to the fact of like relationships are the ultimate resilience system. Or I pulled that theme from one of the sections. So why don't we chat a little bit about that? Because I think, especially in today's world and kind of the younger generation as well. I mean, we're not immune to it either, but there's more and more isolation. And even though we may be connected to more people online. I mean, the like the core relationship, like the fact that you did the book launch in person and then physically went out, to have dinner and so forth with other humans. Even I notice it. Like, so I could get trapped in this recording booth for sometimes hours, and I have the same coffee beans that my local coffee shop sells. I have them at home, but I'm like, I'm gonna go get a coffee there to go order from someone and sit there and maybe have some human dialogue with other people. But it's easy to fall into not doing that, right? So, yeah, why don't you give us a little bit of detail around the power of relationships and the network for to help with this uncertain world that we swim in?
Yeah, in an era of uncertainty, your relationships are more important than ever because A, your relationships are going to help give you the resilience to thrive in uncertain times. And B, your relationships are going to unlock a ton of opportunities for you
Mm,
in terms of your life and career. And some of the pieces of advice that I have in the book are one is the importance of nurturing both strong and weak ties. Strong ties are people who you know really well, your friends, family members, and that's like showing up to them. That's like, being meaningful, like having chats with them, like investing in the relationships. Like one thing I do every day is I go through my Google Photos memories, and I just go through, and then if I see like nice pictures of someone from the past, I just like text them the picture with like not very much context and just like thinking of you.
yeah,
And it's just a nice way to keep in touch with people.
yeah.
And also I think a positive mental health practice because it also makes me just think back to fun little memories in the past.
Well, it's a gratitude loop. Like, you feel good, then the other person. I literally had that happen to me today. Someone sent me, a past guest sent me just a message saying, "A year ago today we recorded." And I'm like, wow. I mean, obviously a photo popped or something in the stream, but then I'm like, I just reshared the episode. I'm like, yeah, this was a great conversation, and that person was fantastic. And he did exactly what you just said. Took probably seconds, to send the message, but here I am talking about it, and that gratitude is still flowing.
Yeah, 100%. And little things like that can make a big difference at building a tie.
Yeah,
And relatedly, I think the importance of weak ties, of thinking around ways to efficiently like nurture and keep in contact with a really large number of people. One thing through Venture for Canada is I've met a lot of people,
sure.
and I have a lot of weak ties. And I found creating an email newsletter that I send like once a month has been a very efficient way to like keep in touch with like 1,700 people
Yeah.
who I can't like regularly be texting pictures to. But if I send a note and then it's being opened by 55% of the people, and it's a nice way to like not try to add value, but just to be like in touch with those people. I also found just even sharing on social, like there's a lot of people who I don't even see that often, but just have seen stuff I've been posting on LinkedIn, and then it just keeps you like top of mind, and you still have some relationship with them, even though you might be haven't talked to them in a while or don't even know them that well. Um, so both are important. I think sometimes people will either over-index to strong ties, like their immediate family,
Yeah.
or they'll over-index to like friends with everyone, friends with no one. And it's important to be intentional about both because the strong ties are going to be what helps you socio-emotionally and really your happiness. And the weak ties are going to be where more of the opportunities come in.
Mm,
Lots of studies show this. There's a paper called "The Strength of Weak Ties" that's arguably the most like cited sociology paper of the last like 70 years. And in it, the Mark Granovetter found that most people get hired through their weak ties, not through their strong ties.
interesting.
So both are really important. The second kind of tip I talk about in the book is just the importance of like being proactive at growing your network constantly. So thinking about like every week, like trying to talk to someone new. Some people are in jobs where you're just working with the same people over and over again, and you're not really like interacting with other people. One of the great things my career adventure for Canada is almost every day for the last 12 years, I've probably spoken with someone who I have never ever spoken with before.
Yeah.
So it's just been this constant meeting new people. Imagine for you, that's potentially you also meet a lot of new
Yeah,
people,
for sure.
and I feel like I just become so much more comfortable meeting new people when you just meet new people a lot, similar to our earlier conversation.
So how are you gonna keep
And
that going if your next chapters seems to be shifting?
I think some of the things I'm doing next will also be
Okay,
involved at the same level of meeting new people. So,
cool.
yeah, I don't think I'll have that problem on it, but it's a good thing for me to be thinking about. And then I'd say that the third thing that's really important is the importance of just being generous.
Mm,
Like a lot of networking advice is framed on, okay, how can you be extract as much value? And I think a lot of people think of that in terms of networking. When ultimately the way you build a network that serves you the most is when you're actually somewhat counterintuitively helping people the most.
yeah.
So be a giver in an efficient way. You don't want to give so much that you're going to burn out. But I think being generous with helping others is really important.
It's so I mean, sometimes I remember someone left me this question and I've uh, graciously, kind of borrowed it or stolen it, and I use it myself when chatting with people. And the question was, it was the end of our conversation, and the person just said, "What can I do for you?" Because I think I was doing them a favor in some capacity, and I've never forgotten that, and I try to ask other people as well if we're in any chat. It's like, is there any way I can support you? And sometimes you're like, first of all, usually the response is, I mean, thank you so much for asking that. And then,
Yeah.
half of the times just knowing that is really, really great. And who knows, maybe the conversation will spark later down the road. And sometimes it's like, actually, I'm trying to do this one thing. If you know anyone or whatever it is, and it's just to your point around just being helpful. Like usually it's not a huge commitment, in the sense of what people are asking for, but it keeps like a real authentic relationship alive and
Yeah.
continues to foster, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think just asking that simple kind of question is something that can show a lot of like care, and those things compound. Like the more
Yeah.
that you do little things to help people all the time, it's amazing the impact that it can have in terms of building like relationships that are really mutually beneficial,
Mhm.
and that helps people in a world of a lot of uncertainty where opportunities emerge really quickly. But how do you get access to opportunities? You get access to opportunities often through people
Yeah,
who want to help you.
for sure. All right, last question for you, Scott. This has been a blast, and I'll have all the details about you and the book in the show notes. So I highly recommend everyone check it out. Um, but I'm curious, let's fast forward post 9 weeks of being away and vacation and that recovery mode. When you're coming back, how do you want to be feeling?
I think very energized and excited and motivated to hit the ground running on what's new. I think, yeah, that if there's maybe one word that I would say is energized, while recognizing the importance of balance.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Scott. Where can we follow along the journey and hang out with you, connect more with you?
You can learn more about my book, The Uncertainty Advantage, wherever you buy books. So you can visit the different folks selling my books, Amazon, Indigo, Barnes and Noble, etc. on scottstirrett.com. So that's SCOTTSTI, two R's, E, two T's.com. And just on the homepage, there's a link to all the places to buy a book. You can also follow along in terms of my monthly newsletter, Scott's Monthly Musings, where I send out tips, habits, resources on how to develop a better relationship with uncertainty. And I send that out monthly. And those are the best ways to keep in touch with me. Thanks.